On June 27th, Jean Massahi took the life of Nael Merzouk outside of Paris in Nanterre. Nanterre is a suburb of Paris that is between Paris and Versailles. And today we're going to talk about systemic racism and how it leads to tragedies such as this for brown and black youth. But first, this is Latina Literati.
If you enjoy amazing stories, wonderful people from past and present, and great books, then this is the channel for you.
Nael was a 17-year-old young man. He had left school to work as a delivery person to help his single mother. He was the only child of North African parents, and his father had abandoned his mother when he was very young. Nael was working as a delivery person when he was pulled over, and Jean, the French police officer, said to him, "I am going to shoot you." So Nael quickly tried to get away in the car and was shot and killed. It's important to understand a little bit of context here. In 2017, the law in France was changed so that police officers could actually shoot at moving vehicles if a passenger was in danger. There were no passengers in this vehicle. Nael, of course, tried to flee for his life, this 17-year-old life that was taken for no reason. There was no reason for the traffic stop other than Nael looked North African. The only reason we know all of this is because the entire incident was caught on video. And so everything that you can see on the video contradicts the official statements made by the French police, and it also contradicts the really racist statements made by the police officers' unions, etc. Incredible that they would be allowed to make edicts that are just horrible in their wording. But again, we need to give this context, and we need to step back and say, what is this all about? So let's start at the beginning, as we always do. France has a population of approximately 68 million people. 59 million approximately of those people that inhabit France were born in France. And the difference come from other European countries, of course, but also from the territories that France once held as colonies. France's colonial aspirations that begin with Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1830, France conquers what is now Algeria and quickly takes Morocco and Tunisia as its protectorates. And so this is raw colonialism, a moment when resources, assets are just being extracted. The time that France was in North Africa is incredibly bloody. Many people are harmed. Many North Africans have worked with them, had the privilege of socializing with them. And I remember one describing that he had never seen his father cry until the French burned his library. And he was a judge in a place called Palestro, Algeria. So these are incredibly hurtful, harmful things that were done in the name of the Greater France, La Grande France, what they called Metropolitan France. And you have France expanding throughout Africa. There's a map of French colonial world, and it's huge, the swaths of Africa that were under French domination. You also have what they call Indochine, what we know now as Vietnam. You have Caribbean possessions, you have Tahiti. You really have possessions around the world, and all those resources are being extracted and taken back to France. So it's really important to understand that France, like all other colonial powers, is taking advantage of the people and the resources of these countries. And so the Algerians themselves say they have paid a blood tax. When you have a colony, there is this kind of back and forth as to who has rights and who doesn't. And many, many French people moved to North Africa because it's a very beautiful place. Algiers is called La Ville Blanche, the White City, and it's perfect Mediterranean weather and wonderful foods and just beautiful people. So a very attractive place to live. Many of the French moved there, and they were known as the Pieds Noirs. That in French means the black feet. I'm giving you a little bit of this flavor so that you understand the mentality that we're talking about. After the Second World War, a defeated France seeking legitimacy wrote a new constitution and said in 1946, all inhabitants of French territories are French citizens. Really interesting because, again, you're going back, are you a subject of the French state or are you a citizen? And in 1946, the decision was made that everyone in all the territories was a French citizen. About 12 years later, in the Constitution of 1958, that was retracted. And all of a sudden, you had to be born in France or of French parents to be a citizen. So you see how it was kind of bait and switch there. So for that 12 years, if you moved to France or your children, wanted to study in France, there wasn't an issue, technically. But again, that was right after World War II, so there wasn't much available in France. They were rebuilding under, of course, the Marshall Plan, the U.S. investing millions and millions of dollars in all of Europe. And so it was a very different place than it is today, and it offered very little compared to what is offered today in educational and other opportunities. So it's interesting because after World War II, France allows inhabitants of its colonies to be citizens, but the colonies actually start asking for, of course, their liberation. They want to now be independent countries. And so you have the Levant in the Middle East, you have Africa, you have many places, Indochina, of course, everyone's saying, we want to be free. We don't want to be under your domination, and France is weak. So wars pop up, wars of independence, and the Algerian War of Independence is an incredibly bloody one. Over 1 million Algerians will lose their lives. And so the idea that somehow people who have left North Africa and are living in France somehow are not French or should be treated differently because they come from North Africa, you can see how incredibly hurtful that is, and the parallels. Because as a result of Nael's killing, France is on fire. And not just Paris. There are even cities in Switzerland next door, which is crazy. There are cities all over Europe where everything is getting burned. So libraries, police stations, schools, thousands of vehicles, because people are angry, and understandably so. Maybe the parallel that we draw here is this is their Watts riot. Do you remember Watts riots, or have you heard of Watts riots, 1965? Also triggered by the mistreatment of a young African-American man and his mother at a police stop. 34 people died during the Watts riots. For a week, Watts burned. And so this reaction is not new. That's in 1965. Next time you have that kind of rioting in LA, of course, is the famous Rodney King. So the reaction is completely something that we've seen here, and we're seeing it now in France. And I want to kind of draw these parallels so that we understand what's going on here and why people are reacting in such a violent way, because this needs to stop. We need to take down the systems that allow our young people to be placed in danger every time they're stopped by police because of the way they look. I also think it's of note that when Algeria finally receives its independence, it actually invites some of the Black Panthers, and I'm not talking about made-up characters from a movie, I'm talking about the Black Panthers that started the breakfast programs and different programs in Oakland, and some of them had to flee the United States, like Eldridge Cleaver, and they were welcomed and were guests of the new Algerian government for a while. So I thought that was also interesting, seeing that there is a connection between liberation movements around the world. Just as an example of how incredibly integrated Algerian culture is to the French cultural society, you can go to any cafe and you will see merguez, which is North African lamb sausage, and couscous on all the menus. And that's the equivalent of here in the United States saying, okay, salsa has overtaken ketchup. You know why? because it's so integrated into the culture and into the habits and into what people want that it completely changes the palette of a country. But in terms of cultural icons, let me just give you a couple of examples. The amazing actress Isabella Gianni, who is Algerian, highly awarded, been in many movies, and here's a picture of her. Another example is the singer Enrico Macias. I actually had the opportunity to attend a concert of his. Such a wonderful, wonderful singer. Amazing, amazing. And he was actually born, I think, in Constantine in Algeria, of Algerian Jewish parents. So again, so many people that we can talk about. Of course, the amazing soccer player Zidane. He was born in Marseille, but his parents are from the Kabylie, which is the Berber Mountains of Algeria. And of course, now he heads up Real Madrid. But again, people that are just changing the face of culture in Europe that come from Algeria. So to say that somehow the Algerians are the other is just insanity. And now for my favorite part of the video, the book recommendations. The first book I'm going to recommend is called Algiers, a Third World Country by Elaine Moktefi, I think is the name. And I thought this was really interesting because this is an American who goes to Algeria to help the freedom fighters as they try and attain their liberation from France. So it's an American perspective. Obviously, there are hundreds of books on this subject, but most of them are in French and, of course, Arabic. So I'm trying to recommend a couple that are available in English. And as always, check your local libraries, check your local booksellers. And if that's not available to you, we always include them in the description box to be purchased from independent sellers online. We love our libraries. The second book is called Kif Kif Demain, or Kif Kif Tomorrow. And it's the first book, and it's by a woman named Faiza Gouene. I think it's Faiza Gouene, and it's the first book that actually uses Arabic or / black slang in a literary work in France. Pretty amazing that it had never been done before. And it's a coming of age story, but the interesting thing is even the title is slang. So Kif Kif Demain means the same thing tomorrow, like it's always going to be the same thing. And she is raised like Nael in a suburb of Paris where there are many immigrants. And it talks about all of the trials and tribulations that immigrants go through in Paris. So if this is of interest to you, really worthwhile as well. The last recommendation is actually not going to be of a book, but a movie. If you want to delve in and really take a look at the Algerian freedom fighters' experience, then you have to see Battle of Algiers. Award-winning movie, most of it in black and white, but it just grips you and gives you a snapshot of what that meant for Algerians and what that war of liberation was like when you had all the different types of attacks by the French. Really worthwhile, and again, award-winning movie, transformative when you watch it. Macron himself has said that the French actions in Algeria were a crime against humanity. So I think that says it all. So things need to change. And our hearts are with the people from North Africa, in France, and wherever they are in the diaspora, as they make their way in these systems that need to change. Just like the systems in the United States need to change, the systems around the world need to change, where our young people are put in harm's way. So thank you so much for joining me on this joint journey. I would love to hear what you think, and I would love to know what you are reading this summer. And as always, we wish you mucho cariño, mucho salud y mucho amor. Gracias.